as I go into an industry, whatever that industry may be, the less I know about it, sometimes the more successful that I am. And when I try to repeat my success in a certain industry and I've known a lot about it, you become institutionalized sometimes with too much information or sometimes institutionalized with fear. Pushing past the point of failure is where success begins.
Welcome to Financial Freestyle here on Yahoo Finance. I'm your host, Ross Mack. Now look guys, no matter where you are in your financial journey, you can never stop learning. And that's why I'm talking to some of the GOATs in their own respective fields. And today is no different as I'm talking to the CEO of Complex, Aaron Levant. How you doing, brother?
Good, thank you for having me.
So one, I said this before we even started, but I have actually worked with Complex in the past. And so as a person that is, part of the culture, I always love and respect that Complex has had a extremely strong hold in the culture, especially in the media world, music world. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
So Aaron, question, man, where would you say, right, as a person that now is the acting CEO of Complex, where would you say the team that predated you guys got it wrong, right? My understanding is that they purchased Complex for roughly 300 million and then ended up, you were part of the group that obviously acquired it for way less than that. Where would you say they got it wrong? And more importantly, where do you guys see you guys getting it right?
I don't know if they necessarily got it wrong. I think the timing was wrong. So what happened was BuzzFeed acquired Complex for around $300 million from Verizon Hearst, a joint venture that was formed, I think in 2016. And then they took the assets of BuzzFeed and the assets of Complex and they went public in a SPAC. And if you're following the timeline of SPACs, the earlier SPACs, ones that like Chamath was doing and et cetera, on the early end, I'm trying to remember the year, let's just call it, 2020, 2021 was a good vintage for SPACs. And they did a SPAC, I believe, 2023. And I think at the peak, BuzzFeed had about 400 plus million in revenue, and their market cap post-SPAC was about $50 million. So the whole company was worth $50 million on the public markets for 450 million in revenue. And that's just, SPACs had bad valuations. And it's just because the way of doing that reverse way of going public just was not favorable in the markets. So that's the opportunity that I saw, that Complex itself was still a premium brand, still had strong consumer connectivity. It still meant something to multiple generations of people. And I could come in and hopefully buy the asset at a good price. Now, I ultimately thought I could buy it for cheaper than I did, but ultimately I paid $108 million for an asset that they had paid $300 million for just 1.5 years earlier. I think we made a pretty good deal. And, yes, I had a lot of ideas on how I could run the company and operate the company differently and evolve the company, but ultimately just in a pure, price ratio, I think I got a good deal.
And to the audience, right, SPACs is, to your point, kind of 2021, 2022, they went crazy. Chamath and a lot of other guys were taking, like, the idea is like almost like a reverse IPO where you effectively are under the SEC scrutiny, where it's like this special purpose acquisition company, you get to just make up a company, right? And all the assets get poured there and then you go public at $10. And so there was once a point that when a SPAC goes public at 10, 20, 30, 40, but you look up a year later, it's at, $2. So that's interesting. But enough with the SPAC stuff. Let's talk about, Complex and more importantly, your view on traditional media, right? I think when you think about traditional media, whether that's print and digital versus where it is now, right? How has traditional media changed? And more importantly, where do you see it going in the next 5 years?
Media has changed a lot. And we've gone from publishers to platforms and individuals. And at one point, publishers, Rolling Stone, let's use that as the classic music magazine, right? Meant a lot. If you're on the cover of Rolling Stone, it can make or break your album, right? Like publishers have more power than the individual musicians. Now, because of Instagram and all these things, the musicians have more followers than the publisher, right? They don't need to have it, but like the reason for being there is different. And the platforms really control the audience more than the publisher. So we've seen a dramatic shift from publishers to platforms. That also means the ad dollars have shifted from publishers to platforms. So if you're going to be a publisher, in this day and age, you know, you can't just have the same business model that Complex, let's say Vice had a few years ago, because advertisers, people who spend money advertising now can go direct to the platform and find a different way to segment and target very specific audiences. Where magazines used to come to you and say, hey, we reached this demo, we've got this much circulation. It was almost like buying television ads. It's kind of general. It's like a shotgun approach to buying advertising. Now you can become a sniper. I can reach males who are 16 years old in north of Wisconsin or whatever, right? You can get very specific. So because you can get very specific, you have to have a much more diversified business approach, like what we're doing with Complex. Like, don't just rely on advertising. Now, our advertising business is growing and we're doing better in the traditional media space. That's because we've been able to evolve from platform to platform and get really good at things like vertical video. But that's why we have the diversified business model we have today of events and commerce and all these things. We look at something like Vice, who I believe at their peak were worth over $4 billion. And the digital assets of Vice minus their agency sold for $20 million, I believe earlier this year or last year, to Savage Media, a company that was worth over $4 billion because they didn't diversify from the traditional digital media model, right? And it's hard to maintain that.
I think we actually need to get into that, right? Because when you talk about kind of across the board, ad revenue is obviously struggling. So let's talk about the success of Complex and, how are you guys able to adapt and more importantly, remain diversified? Like, what are some of the things you guys are doing?
Yeah, when I bought the company, I had one goal, which was diversification overall, but particularly commerce. And if you look back at the very first issue of Complex magazine, going back to 2002, was a print magazine. The first issue had Pharrell Williams on the cover, and at the top it said Men's Buyer's Guide. Half the magazine for the first decade was literally like pages of the best sneakers, the best jeans, the best t-shirts, and the other side was editorial. Complex never built a shopping business. So with my company Network, who ultimately acquired Complex and merged together, was to take our assets of e-commerce, merge it together with Complex, and form the Complex shop. Now we have an e-commerce business that's over $100 million. Our e-commerce business is growing faster than our advertising business. So we still have advertising. And because I believe the previous management team was doing a bad job at the video slate, at the monetization, all these things, we've been able to repair and grow our advertising business. But having these diversified revenue streams like e-commerce and like our events business, which is a really powerful business. We just did ComplexCon, our flagship event in Las Vegas, that generated over 25 million in revenue for us as a company. And the previous year, before we had owned Complex, so 2 years ago, 2023, the event had done less than $5 million in revenue, right? So we've grown that event 5x in less than 2 years. So, all these things are important. We're not necessarily shrinking any one part of the business, but the diversification in the sum of the parts is much larger than Complex has ever been. So today, I think the peak of Complex previously as a company in revenue was 2019. And then the company was on a rapid decline from that point, post COVID and all the leadership changes and the ownership changes. And now the company's bigger than it ever was in its peak in 2019.
Well, one, congrats on that, right? You said you guys did 25 million in revenue. I want to say you guys had, was it over 70,000 attendees? Like what did you guys get right this year versus 2 years ago when you said you guys only had $5 million of revenue?
This team and myself really understand events. My connection to Complex in the first place is I was part of the team that created, ideated, and launched ComplexCon back in 2016. When I was a joint venture partner, I was working at another company called Repop, where we own Comic-Con and a lot of the other big events. We actually partnered with Complex to build and create ComplexCon. So that's how I got to know the Complex team and that event, and we created that together. So bringing back a lot of the original people that helped build our events franchise, and also investing. Like, our first year out the gate, relaunching ComplexCon, moving it from LA to Las Vegas, having Travis Scott headline. Those are the kind of things, like those are not cheap investments. Those are millions of dollars of investments or tens of millions of dollars investments we made into event franchises like ComplexCon. But then to take the revenue from sub 5 million to 25 million in a year and a half, that's how you get there. It's having the right know-how, matched with the right investments, and taking the right risks to strategically move the event from LA to Vegas and say, hey, we're going to create this tentpole event and this destination in Vegas, and not just rely on Southern California kind of drive-up traffic. We're going to make people fly and come here and spend the weekend with us and be really committed to being focused and engaged with our brand.
So let's keep peeling back ComplexCon, because I was a person that was extremely excited to witness the verses during ComplexCon, right? We had Cash Money versus No Limit. I want to say you guys had over 8 million viewers. Did I get that right? Yeah. That was obviously major for the culture. And so, can we talk about that partnership with Versus, and more importantly, kind of, how do you guys see that continuing to evolve moving forward?
First and foremost, I'm a fan of Versus, and I watched it unfold over COVID, as I'm sure you did. We're all locked in our houses, and they started doing those informal battles on Instagram, and then eventually came to Apple Music. It's an incredible franchise. And, they ended up selling the business to Triller, which also I think went public in a SPAC, and it turned out not so great. And they spent a couple of years trying to buy their IP back or settle a lawsuit to get the brand back from Triller. We were lucky enough to be able to partner with Swizz Beatz and Timberland, obviously two of the greatest music producers of all time, and partner with them to relaunch Versus. Now, the first Versus happened at ComplexCon, and we plan on having a Versus at ComplexCon every year. But this is more than just at ComplexCon. Complex is now a partner in the overall Versus brand, and we're gonna be doing this on a monthly basis, hopefully going forward into the new year. Both R&B and hip hop, as they've done traditionally, but also taking it to other genres, taking it into rock, taking it into Latin, taking it into K-pop, right? So we see this expansion globally of what Versus is, how many we do, the quality of what we do, and also being able to tie that into our IRL event franchises. So we're really excited about the partnership with Swizz and Timberland. They're incredible partners. And what we had done at ComplexCon, being the first one back after a couple of years of no more Versus, people said, oh, Versus is just a COVID thing. Da, da, da. I think the highest Versus ever was Gucci Mane Jeezy with over 9 million live viewers. And they range between, let's say, 3 to 6 to maybe 7 million viewers was their average during COVID, peak lockdown. The fact that we came out of the gates with 8.4 million plus live viewers showed we could do the second highest Versus viewership ever. So I couldn't be more excited about Versus as a new event franchise, but also as a new part of our digital media portfolio at Complex, and how live as a major franchise in our kind of media portfolio, things that are live and happening in real time is a really important part of today's media landscape. Whether you look at iShowSpeed, Kai Cenat, right? Streaming and live is a really important part of the media landscape. And it's the one thing Complex historically has not been in. And now it really catapults us not just to being in live, but being the biggest thing in live entertainment.
Look, guys, we got to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to have more with Aaron Levant, the CEO of Complex. All right, guys, welcome back to Financial Freestyle. And look, we're talking to the CEO of Complex, Aaron. And one of the things you said that I actually really love is that you believe that ignorance is rich. How does that philosophy actually shape kind of your risk taking with investments now that you run Complex, which is one of the top media and e-commerce companies?
My general ideology around that has just come from my experience in my life throughout my career, where I've been in many different industries. I've been in food, I've been in events, I've been in apparel, I've now been in media, I've been in e-commerce, um, a lot of different businesses that I've touched on over my 25 plus year career. And I noticed that as I go into an industry, whatever that industry may be, the less I know about it, sometimes the more successful that I am. And when I try to repeat my success in a certain industry and I've known a lot about it, you become institutionalized sometimes with too much information, or sometimes institutionalized with fear. And if my very first really successful business was a B2B trade show company. And I often think if I went back today and I try to start a B2B trade show company, because I know so much about it, even though I've been very successful and sold a very successful B2B trade show company, because I know the pitfalls, it actually wouldn't make me more successful, it would make me less successful. And because I didn't know anything about it, I tried things that no one who knew about it would even dare try. And like I fumbled in to success because I tried stuff that by any conventional wisdom would have been so crazy that you would just never have done it. And the things I did were so challenging to the conventional wisdom that it actually allowed me not just to be successful, become hyper successful. So that's where that ignorance is bliss things comes from, or ignorance is rich comes from. It's like that I will not know anything, therefore not be scared to try things that the seasoned veterans will go, oh no, you can't do it that way because X, Y, or Z. When I don't know X, Y, or Z, I'm actually more dangerous, even if I don't realize it. Now, I might fumble a few times too, but I land on something that's like an angle, a weird way of doing something or looking at something that no one thought of, which is ultimately like a hack to win. And like that is something I really believe in. And it's not it wasn't like by design. It's actually the opposite of by design. It's like going and trying things that you don't know. The amateur or the novice approach sometimes can be better than the expert approach.
If you were to literally rebuild today Complex from scratch, what do you think that version of Complex would look like? So once again, going into it not knowing anything, none of the premiere, none of the history that Complex has, or any. Well, we'll call it Complex, right? What would that be? What would that look like?
I think I'm building it. I want in 2016, I wanted to make Complex an event. ComplexCon I did. Now I'm spending a lot of energy on that. I want to make Complex an e-commerce business. Ultimately, I want to make Complex a mall, like a physical mall, the same way you think of Westfield or Simon Mall. You go to the mall. I think Complex could be a mall. People go to ComplexCon for 2 days of the coolest mall in the world. I think we could be like the Mall of America, right? Like, there's no reason Complex can't be that. Complex is the same company that invented First We Feast and Hot Ones, which turned into a very successful hot sauce business, right? Like, I think there's no rules to what we become. And as long as we stop putting bounding boxes, that idea of staying in the box, and it was very cliche, thinking in the box, like I'm breaking out of the box everywhere. And wherever fans of streetwear, sneaker culture, hip hop culture, popular culture are, Complex can be in that conversation in whatever business or interaction that is. And that's really the way I think about it.
And so let's actually talk about how you guys are monetizing attention. I know in the past, I did an episode with the CEO of Revolt, Datavio Samuels, and it was interesting because usually, like, media, how it's evolved. Well, now it's creator-led economy. And so, how are you guys effectively adapting to kind of this new world where creators, to your point, are effectively the focal point as opposed to publishers? Are you guys leveraging that? Are you utilizing that? Kind of what's your strategy with that?
Creators, streamers, those are the hottest people in the media space today. Obviously, so much has been talked about. Kai Cenat, I Show Speed, right? That's where, the hot conversation topic in media is, period. Complex has been tackling streaming really in three ways. One, we are now streaming. We have our own slate of hosts, people like Jordan Rose, people like Speedy Mormon, all these people that came out from Complex who are great hosts and personalities who are now streaming on Complex. We just did a live interview the other day with Kevin Hart. So a lot of our popular YouTube franchises and things, we're now doing versions of that live and building up our own in-house hosts and developing in-house talent. We're also doing things like Versus, which are big event-based streaming moments, which have way bigger viewership. If Kai Cenat, maybe 40, 50, 100,000 streams on average, right? We're doing 8.4 million on Versus. So we have these few moments a year that might be way bigger than any of the other streamers. And then thirdly, we have our events like ComplexCon, where we invite everyone to come. So you have streamers like Marlon walking around streaming. We have people like Blackboy Max who actually go and set up their own booth and did a 24-hour live stream live from ComplexCon and slept in the show and streamed the whole thing, and inviting in everybody from DJ Academics to Ray to some of the guys from AMP. I mean, just the amount of streamers that we invited. We probably had 100 different streamers attend ComplexCon. So it's both creating our own streaming content and inviting streamers into our events to create their own content and aggregate and collaborate, stream with them. So I think you're going to see us attack this new medium in media in different ways. And we've even been talking about launching our own streamer house, our own compound, if you will. So there's a lot of things that we've been working on to kind of touch onto that space.
I love it. All right. So let's talk to some of the entrepreneurs that are watching this, right? What would you say are three things all entrepreneurs should possess when it comes to running a successful business?
I've started 9 companies in my career, and every single one of them was really hard. And you get kicked in the teeth a lot. So it's like some version of resilience, but beyond resilience, it's like the ability to not give up ever. And you said one of my quotes, which is that ignorance is rich. There's another one, which is like pushing past the point of failure is where success begins. And there's been a few of my businesses where on paper, we were DOA. We were dead on arrival. That was it. We should have pulled the plug on that business at that time. It was done. We were knocked out. All statistical nature is like, we should have just closed up shop and called bankruptcy and moved on and gone and got a job or moved back to our parents' house or whatever the analogy is. And it was keeping going at that point when you were literally done, which is when we found the most success. So pushing past the point of failure, literally pushing until you fail, till you literally fall off the horse on your face and you're like, I'm done. And then get up and keep going. That is the difference between being successful. And most people do not have the grit to do that. So that's the biggest advice I could have, which is like, keep going beyond the point of it being logical. There's nothing logical about being an entrepreneur. So that may sound crazy, but that's been my experience. It's more than my advice, it's my experience. On a few of my businesses where I was done, we were knocked out. I just kept going, and then somehow that started working.
Love that. I love that. Last question. If you had a magic ball, crystal ball, what do you think kind of a few years from now, what do you think AI is going to look like in traditional media sense? Or not even traditional, in the new current form of media? How do you see AI playing out in media?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as you look at Sora and Nano Banana and a lot of the new Google tools, the ability to create really beautiful content quickly with short prompts. I think what a lot of people are saying is that there's no more monoliths in media. And even Disney Plus just announced you'll be able to create your own content inside the Disney Plus app with AI tools, right? So you'll be able to create your own content, your own adventure. So video games, movies, television shows, short form content is all going to be customized and created for you in some way. We're not all going to be watching one, whatever. Everyone tuned into Stranger Things this week. We're going to see more fragmentation because there'll be a customized version of everything you're watching for you. And it's going to take all your likes, dislikes, everything you're watching, all this information about you, and it's going to be creating custom content, custom video games, custom everything for you. I think that is one of the biggest changes coming to the media landscape, is that everyone will have their own thing, and the ability for anyone, me, you, some kid in high school, to be able to create their own beautiful high-end content that looks like $100 million movie. That's totally disruptive. So I see big productions coming down, customization of content coming up, interactive content that's totally custom and tailorized to you coming up, and ability for anyone to become a publisher. The barrier for entry was already getting easier with YouTube and, home video production, whatever, but like the barrier is literally, $20. It went from like 20,000 to 2,000 to $20 to zero, right? Like, I was creating some stuff a weekend with Nano Banana that used to cost me 50,000 to do in a photo shoot. It's that good. So, I think it's anyone's game, but I think it really equals up to further fragmentation. It was already fragmented. We used to be, 4 television channels in the 60s, right? Then cable, and then 200, and then YouTube, and then creators. Now everyone's a creator. You're talking about thousands of things, but if you're really interesting and you can break out through that, then you can be really valuable. If you're Mr. Beast or whatever the example is, if you get through the noise, that there's more and more noise, the amount of noise and the amount of, it's just expanding. If you can break through and really get attention and an audience, you might be 10 times more valuable than you were in the previous iteration, because it's hard to get any centralization and concurrent attention.
Man, that's a phenomenal point, man. Aaron, I just really, really want to thank you for being part of this episode. You crushed it. And that's it, guys. You already know what to do. Make sure you like, subscribe, tell your auntie and your cousins to also watch this episode. Until then, we'll see you next week. This is Financial Freestyle here on Yahoo Finance.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.